Hello everyone, this is Ben, and in this video what we're going to be doing is talking about an argument that I want to present against the idea that morality is subjective. So specifically, just lay down some categories. Ethics is the philosophical study of morality, and morality has to do with right and wrong, good and bad, and that sort of thing. And ethical relativism is the idea that morality is subjective. It's the idea that it has no reality beyond our minds. And ethical absolutism is a wide array of different views, but they all share this in common, that they believe that there is such a thing as good and evil and right and wrong beyond just whatever we humans say. Now, and there's actually different kinds of ethical relativism, but I guess it's not that important. My point is, a lot of people, especially young people, believe in something called subjective morality, which is the idea that people made it up. And there's other forms of relativism, like you could, it could be just like a byproduct of evolution. I'm not going to talk about that in this video. All we're going to talk about is the idea that people made up the concept of right and wrong. And what I'm going to do, and that there's no reality to it beyond our mind. It's not objectively a fact. It's just something people made up, and they could have made up something else, and that kind of thing. And so the issue with that is that it's actually incoherent. And when I say incoherent, I don't just mean vague or confusing. Sometimes people don't know what incoherent means. I mean literally incoherent. I mean it's illogical, to the point that there is no possible reality where it could ever happen. You can't, as a human being, we cannot make up the idea of morality. Okay? There is no possible world where it could ever happen. It can't possibly happen. It's like saying, well, there might be a world where 1 + 1 = 37. No, there might not be. Okay? There is no such world. So, I mean, there's a world where you have $1 million, and there's a world where you have $5, possibly. But there is no possible world where 5 equals 1 million. Okay? The number 5 equals the number 1 million. So the reason why it's logically impossible is that we're not talking about somebody just making up one rule. That's easy to do. You and I could do that right now. You could just make up a rule that, it's wrong to eat Rice Krispies, and go around telling people that, and maybe you could one day convince everyone that it's wrong to eat Rice Krispies, and then everybody would just grow up thinking it's wrong to eat Rice Krispies. Okay, that's not what we're talking about when we're saying that morality is itself subjective. Not one moral law here or there. No, the whole kit and caboodle. What is morality? Well, essentially, we're talking about making value judgments. So if you think of, a world where people steal is not as good as a world where people do not steal from each other, you're making a value judgment about which world is the better world. Okay? Which world do you place more value on? Which is the one that you prefer? Which is your preference, right? Which one is better? Okay? So, that's all it is, right? Now, the thing is, when you make the choice, or let's say that back in the past humanity had no morals, okay, and once upon a time, in the long, long ago, Caveman Bob was the first to make up the idea, and he told Caveman Jim, or maybe his son Elroy, to believe that it's wrong to steal, and he just made up the idea. problem with that is that he would have to believe that it was good to make up the idea before he made up the idea. All decision making and all choosing, all making of choices necessarily entails the making of value judgments. It's just impossible for it not to be the case, because whenever you choose A over B, you're placing more value over A than B, because you could have chosen B, right? If you choose B, then you must like B better than A. Okay? Now, the only way people can try to wiggle out of what I'm saying here is they could say well, before we get to any counter arguments, let me just restate the position that I'm defending here. Is all I'm saying is you would have to already believe in morality before you make it up. So it keeps getting pushed back a step, because as soon as we exist, it's kind of like we already have to make value judgments all the time. And so it's kind of hard to imagine people making it up. It could be an illusion that's foisted on us through, how our biology, evolution, or Descartes was a philosopher once upon a time who imagined a demon who was tricking us into believing it. Descartes' demon, or could be God, or like a host of things. Those are all other questions that we're not going to address in this video. The only question I'm focusing on is, and the point I'm making is that the idea of people making it up is logically incoherent, because people would have to already make value judgments before they make up the idea of making value judgments. You see, we're not talking about making up one rule. We're talking about making up the idea that any situation at all is any better or worse than any other situation. That's really what we're talking about. Okay? So, that's a problem. It seems like you'd have to already have made it up before you make it up. Okay? And already believe in it, and then also make it up. Because when you make it up, it means that you didn't believe in it, you just made it up and told it to everyone. But then you have to already believe in it before you didn't believe in it and told it to everyone. So that's why I say it's incoherent. Okay? Now, the counter response that people can make to this is just say, well, there are trivial choices in life that don't seem to be really moral choices. So, like, for example, a classic example is breakfast cereals. Okay, so on my kitchen table, I have a box of Frosted Flakes and a box of fake Lucky Charms, or a bag of fake Lucky Charms. So which one do I eat, or which one should you eat if you come over and visit? Which one will you prefer? It would seem that there's no real moral quality to whichever one you pick. It just seems obvious that it's not really a moral choice, and it's actually a downfall of certain moral systems that it's a counter argument against them when they try to turn trivial choices like that into moral choices. And I'll happily grant that that's a trivial choice. It's not really a moral choice, but it still is a value judgment. And so what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves, what's the difference between a moral choice and this sort of trivial value judgment? Okay, well, morality kind of breaks down into two sorts of categories. There's what's called moral duties, and there's what's called moral values. So, like, a moral duty is something that you have to do, and you're bad if you don't do it, or you're bad if you, do it. Do's and don'ts. And most people, when we think of morality, we're just thinking of moral duties. Even though we know about moral values, we just tend to not think about them. But we all know about them. But a moral duty would be like, when you go to the store, you can't just steal milk from the store. You can't just grab a gallon of milk and walk out. You have a moral duty not to steal, okay? To pay for the items that you take from the store or not take them, okay? That's how stores work. A moral value would be something like, you could clean your house today, or you could mow the lawn today, on Saturday. Both of those things need doing, and maybe you could do both, but for the sake of understanding the concept, let's just say you got to pick one. Both of those are good to do, and none of them have to be done today, so you don't have to do either of them, but they're good for you to do. Or you could think of, here's another example. What career will you choose? Will you be, a wildlife biologist? Or will you be a tree removal guy, an arborist? Will you be a carpenter, work in construction? You don't have to do, you don't have a moral duty to do any of those things. But any one of them that you choose does seem to clearly possess moral value, or we could say that it's a good thing to do, that's good. Or another example might be what's called in ethics. Ethics is the philosophical study of morality. What's called a Super Irrogatory Act, not erotic, irrogatory. But like, let's say that you're in a crowded room and you see that there's a bomb in the room, and you jump on it so that you'll die, but you'll save as many people as possible. That's what's called a Super Irrogatory Act, and what that means is that we recognize that action possesses a high degree of moral value, but we also don't think that anyone really has a moral duty to do that for everyone else. But it's highly morally valuable. Okay, so it's acts of heroism like that. So the point I'm making is that, do you eat the Frosted Flakes or the fake Lucky Charms? Well, it's a trivial choice, but it's still a value judgment. And the point I'm making is that all morality involves value judgments. In fact, as soon as value judgments are part of what you're doing, then morality is part of what you're doing. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. That's an essential property of what morality is. It's the making of value judgments. So, like, if you think that the better world is the world where people don't steal milk from the store, then that's a value judgment. As opposed to the world where people do all steal milk from the store. You value one above the other. Okay? And so, what I'm saying is that trivial choice about the Frosted Flakes or the Lucky Charms is not really a different sort of category of value judgment that's not moral. It's not in a whole other category. It's in the same category. But the reason it's a trivial choice and not a moral choice is really just because we don't know which is really the better situation. We're kind of just guessing. And we often say that it's just someone's preference. Yeah, fair enough, that you just have a freedom to prefer this or that, because no one really knows. So for example, if you knew that it would be a better world if you ate the Frosted Flakes, that in some way that would, there would be more benefits for happiness for you and for other people, that if you ate the Frosted Flakes, then you do believe that you're morally required to eat the Frosted Flakes, because you believe that's a better world. Okay? The issue is that we don't really know that. We have no way of knowing that about something like that. So it's just kind of a guess. And so you're not really, there's no real, it's a trivial choice. It's unimportant. It's insignificant. And even if one is better than the other, it would seem that it's infinitesimal difference, that it's like not really all that much better. It's not a significant choice. It doesn't carry great weight. There's not a huge difference between the two. Whereas if a world where everyone steals from the store, as opposed to a world where nobody steals from the store, seems like an obviously very different world. Okay? So, what I'm saying is this counter rebuttal where you talk about trivial choices doesn't really avoid the problem. Trivial choices are still value judgments, and they're still moral choices, but they're not really moral choices in the sense of like, do I steal from the store or not? Because we don't really know whether I really should eat the Frosted Flakes or the Lucky Charms. We have no way of knowing that, and it would seem that even if one was the better world, it wouldn't be much better. It would be a slight difference. So yeah, you can eat whatever cereal you want and not, you don't have to experience moral guilt about whether you pick that one or that one. But at the end of the day, if there is no morality, and I stand by what I'm saying here, then people don't value this over that. And so how do you even exist as a human making choices without doing that? You can't. And you especially can't make the choice to create morality. It's a problem. So we want to sum it up. All I'm saying is people would have to already believe, in morality before they make up morality. That, what's the better world? The world where people believe in morality. The essence of what I'm saying is that if there is a world where there's no such thing as morality, then how do people make it up? Because they don't think it's good to make it up. Why did they make it up unless they thought it was be a better world, the world where they made it up? That's really the issue. And this idea of eating cereal and trivial choices doesn't really avoid the problem, because that's still in the same category of value judgments. Now you could argue and say, well, we're just guessing with all of it. Okay, but that's not the same thing as making it up wholesale. That's just us, having limited information about right and wrong, which is like a whole other question. And maybe us not really knowing what we think we know, but that's not the same thing as not believing in it and making it up. Okay. Alright, which is a very different thing. And so, it seems quite clear that people would have to believe in morality before they make up the idea of morality. And that's a serious problem for subjective morality. So anyway, I'm glad this video hasn't run on any longer than it needs to. I'm really just sitting here trying to think of a way to sum this up. The basic idea is we're talking about a world where no one thinks that anything is any better or worse than anything else. And then they decide to think it would be better if they do this. Okay? That's the problem. They would have to, yeah. So anyway, I hope I've said everything clearly. Thank you so much for your time.